Accordingly, by Accordingly, my watches by the dark portal became less persistent, and much of my time was spent in other equally strange pursuits. I would sometimes rise very quietly in the night, stealing out to walk in those churchyards and places of burial from which I had been kept by my parents. What I did there I may not say, for I am not now sure of the reality of certain things, but I know that on the day after such a nocturnal ramble I would often astonish those about me with my knowledge of topics almost forgotten for many generations. It was after a night like this that I shocked the community with a queer conceit about the burial of the rich and celebrated Squire Brewster, a marker of local history who was interred in 1711, and whose slate headstone bared the graven skull and crossbones, was slowly crumbling to powder. In a moment of childish imagination I vowed not only to the undertaker, Goodman Simpson, had stolen the silver-buckled shoe, silken hose, and satin small cloths of the deceased before burial, but that the squire himself, not fully inanimated, had turned twice in his mound-covered coffin on the day after interment. But the idea of entering the tomb never left my thoughts, being indeed stimulated by the unexpected genealogical discovery that my own maternal ancestry possessed at least a slight link with the supposedly extinct family of the Hydes. Last of my paternal race I was likewise, and last of this older and more mysterious line. I began to feel that the tomb was mine, and to look forward to hot eagerness to the time when I might pass within the stone door and down those slimy stone steps in the dark. I now formed the habit of listening very intently at the slightly open portal, choosing my favourite hours of midnight stillness for the odd vigil. By the time I came of age I had made a small clearing in the thicket before the mould-stained facade of the hillside, allowing the surrounding vegetation to encircle and overhang the space like the walls and roof of Sullivan Bower. This bower was a temple, the fastened door my shrine, and here I would lie outstretched on the mossy ground, thinking strange thoughts and dreaming strange dreams. The night of the first revelation was a sultry one. I must have fallen asleep from fatigue, for it was with a distant sense of awakening that I heard the voices. Of these tones and accents I hesitated to speak. Of their quality I will not speak, but I may say that they presented certain uncanny differences in vocabulary, pronunciation, and mode of utterance. Every shade of New England dialect, from the uncouth syllabus to the Puritan colonist, to the precise rhetoric of 50 years ago, seemed represented in that shadowy colleague, though it was only later that I noticed the fact. At the time, indeed, my attention was distracted from the matter by another phenomenon, a phenomenon so fleeting that I could not take oath upon its reality. I barely faced that I awoke. A light had been hurriedly extinguished within the sunken sepulchre. I do not think I was either astounded or panic-stricken, but I know that I was greatly and permanently changed that night. Upon returning home, I went with much directiveness to a rotten chest in the attic, where I found the key which next day unlocked with ease the barrier I had long stormed in vain. It was in the soft glow of the late afternoon that I first entered the vault. On the abandoned slope I spell a spell was upon me, and my heart leaped with an exultation I can ill describe. As I closed the door behind me and descended the dripping steps of the light my lone candle, I seemed to know the way, and though the candle sputtered with the stifling reek of the place, I felt singularly at home in the musty charnel house air. Looking about me, I beheld many marble slabs, bearing coffins of the remains of coffins. Some of these were sealed and intact, but others had nearly vanished, leaving the silver handles and plates isolated amidst certain curious heaps of whitish dust. Upon one plate I read the name Sir Geoffrey Hyde, who had come from Sussex in 1640 and died here a few years later. In a conspicuous alcove was one fairly well preserved and unattended casket, adorned with a single name which brought me both a smile and a shudder. An odd impulse caused me to climb upon the board slab, extinguish my candle, and lie down within the vacant box. In the grey light of dawn I staggered from the vault and locked the chain of the door behind me. I was no longer a young man, though but 21 winters had chilled my bodily frame. Early rising villagers who observed my homeward progress looked at me strangely, and marvelled at the sight of the bold reverie which they saw in one whose life was known to be sober and solitary. I did not appear before my parents till after a long and refreshed sleep.